in living color.
The Washington Redskins and Miami Dolphin matchup is definitely the closest matchup we've had in the last 7 Super Bowl games. It's going to be a great football game.
California, here I come, right back where I started from, where bowers of flowers bloom in the sun. Each morning at dawning, birdies sing and everything the sun is this and don't be late. That's why I can hardly...
Brought to you by the B.F. Goodrich Tire Company, makers of the Lifesaver Steel Radial Tire. If you want Goodrich, you'll just have to remember Goodrich. This is the Laguna Beach, California area, about 50 miles south of Los Angeles. We're here in a park called Heisler Park, and right down below us is a marine preserve. You can see the cove, the beautiful beach down the line. The reason we're down in this area is this is where the triangle of headquarters are for the Super Bowl game. The National Football League headquarters are in Newport Beach. The Miami Dolphins have been training in the Long Beach area, and the Washington Redskins in the Anaheim, California area. Magnificent view. It's like Beaver Falls, huh?
Not quite. It's beautiful.
Hi, everybody. This is Kurt Gowdy with Joe Namath. 2 years ago, we had Joe on our preview show leading the Super Bowl V. He picked the Baltimore Colts to beat the Dallas Cowboys by 3 points. Right on target. I don't know how you're going to do today, but we're anxiously waiting your prediction. Of course, when you think of Joe Namath, you think of the great passing arm. The game I did with the Colts this year, the Jet game, where he threw for 496 yards, 6 touchdowns, I still think it's the greatest single-game passing performance in the history of professional football. But Joe Namath has more than the quick release in the arm. He's a very keen and dedicated student of football. He spent his athletic life probing the game, studying it, and so we've asked him to come on, pick these two teams apart, and give us his very frank appraisal of how they match up. And I think, Joe, you're one of 960 players who didn't make the Super Bowl. How do you feel about it this year?
Well, I don't feel good, just as those other 960 guys feel. But we're all looking forward to this game. It's one of the closest matchups we've seen in Super Bowl history, and it looks like it's going to be a great football game.
All right, now, Joe, we know both teams are ball control clubs. They have great running attacks, so I think, first of all, we should take a look at the running backs that we're going to be watching today. Miami, of course, led all of pro football and broke all the records for ground gaining, and the Redskins have a potent attack. One man we don't hear as much about is Charlie Haraway.
True, Kurt. He's talked about for his blocking ability, but here you see what kind of speed he has. He can get outside and run with that football. He's a fine blocker, there's no doubt about it, but he can run the football.
He blocks for Larry Brown, who led his conference in ground gaining and yet missed the last 2 regular games of the season.
Larry Brown's just a great runner. He's done everything anyone ever asked him to do on a football field. Some people like O.J. Simpson to run the football a little better, though. I don't know.
What do your teammates think?
Well, they like Simpson. They think O.J.'s got the better all-around ability, but how can you say Brown is, second to anyone?
One thing we know Brown can really do is cut back. Bonacani, the other linebacker, moves laterally. I wonder if they try and cut back inside of him, get him going one way and run Brown back.
I think they will. Brown, he can pick his own holes with tremendous talent. He has tremendous talent to pick his own holes. He's quick. They'll try and keep Bonacani occupied, that's for sure.
Now, how about some of the backs coming out and taking flares and short passes? Here's Brown taking one.
Right, Kurt. Well, both Miami and Washington play similar coverages in the secondary, so the backs may be a big factor when it comes to receiving that football. And any time Larry Brown gets his hands on the football, he's a threat to go all the way.
I think every opposing coach thought the big difference this year with Miami was the added threat of Mercury Morris playing more. Incidentally, look at that referee blowing without a whistle in his mouth. That's a force of habit. That's instinct. But here's Mercury now. Mercury Morris, and he's a tremendous outside threat for them.
Right, he added another dimension to Miami's running attack. Miami has Jim Kick in the wings. Jim has started several games for him. So Kick and Zonk is a tremendous threat inside, great power running. The Mercury's got the speed and agility and quickness to jump outside as he does here. He's not as strong as the other runners. As you can see here, there's a defensive back pulling him down with virtually one hand. But he does have that quickness and agility to jump outside.
When they bring Morris in and take Kick out, does this bother the other clubs? Does a change of pace bother them, the tempo?
Well, I think they'll look for the outside game more with Morris in there. Of course, they can't look for it too much because you have number 39, Larry Zonka, jumping through there, who's just a great, great punishing runner.
And leading him is that guard, the all-pro guard, Larry Little. What a blocker, huh?
True. Howard Schnellenberger, the offensive line coach of Miami, he's done a tremendous job with them, and their guards probably have the best technique of anyone pulling in professional football.
What did the Jet defensive players say about Zonka? Do they think he's the hardest hitter in the game?
Well, you know, he's probably the most punishing runner that we've faced all year long. Several times I hear our defensive ball players comment on how punishing he is. He doesn't try to run around people. He tries to run over them. He'll look them up and try to run over them. He doesn't waste much time. He just wants to get the yardage and get the first down.
And he's playing on natural grass today, Joe. He likes that.
Right. All the runners like that, I'm sure, because it's better to fall on. Plus, they feel a little more secure with the footing. Here again, you see 2 and 3 guys trying to put on Larry Zonka, and he always gets that extra 2 or 3 yards for you.
He's really tough in those short yardage situations. Well, let's quickly rate the running backs of both teams. Who do you give the edge to?
Well, I'm going to have to go with Miami on the edge because of the added threat with Kick coming in the game for the inside game, and with Mercury Morse going outside. I think they have 3 backs that are super.
All right, now, the receiving core coming up. Both teams very skilled wide receivers. First of all, Paul Warfield of Miami.
Well, Paul is just a great receiver. He catches the ball in the crowd, as you can see here. He's breaking a seam on his own. And again, like Larry Brown, anytime he gets his hands on the ball, he can go all the way.
That's the play he broke for over 50 yards against the Steelers in the American Football Conference Championship game. And over on the other side, Washington has a real deep threat in Charlie Taylor.
Charlie Taylor. You know, I keep mentioning that we have the game breakers. Well, we do. There's about 4 or 5 game breakers in this game. And Charlie Taylor has got tremendous speed and tremendous hands, tremendous knowledge of the game. Here he just flat out runs a cornerback from the Dallas for a touchdown.
Do you think that he can get deep against the Miami 3-deep zone?
I don't think so, Kurt. Miami, I believe, is going to try to shut off that outside deep threat. And they've done it better than anyone I've played against. I know that. Both of these long passes to Taylor, they just did happen to get him isolated man-to-man with that one Dallas cornerback. Dallas, I guess, rotated the other way or what. I don't think Miami's going to do that.
All right, if they can't get deep, then what'll they go to? Inside slants?
Right. Both Miami and Washington throw the inside slant patterns because of the coverages they face this year. And Warfield, Twilley, Taylor, and Jefferson, they're not afraid to catch that ball in the crowd. Here again, Taylor beats his man one-on-one for a touchdown. You can't cover him man-to-man consistently.
What about Roy Jefferson, the other wide receiver of Washington?
Well, Roy, there's a good picture of him here catching the ball in the crowd. He's not afraid of crowds. He got great hands, and he's got excellent speed. And another big asset he has is Charlie Taylor on the other side. Now, if they're going to rotate, which way do you rotate? I guess you'd have to rotate towards Taylor, so that's going to give Jefferson some room.
Miami says they're afraid of Charlie Taylor after he catches the ball. He's a dangerous threat running with the ball.
Oh, he can fly. There's no doubt about it. All of these fellas we're talking about can really run fast, except for Twilley. Twilley doesn't have the speed, but he has the knowledge. He knows how to get open, and he has excellent hands.
All right, Joe, how do you rate the receivers now on both clubs?
Well, we didn't mention the tight ends, Smith and Fleming, but I think I'm going to have to go with Miami again from this, well, for the reason that they're better blockers. I don't think the passing game is going to be that big a factor on a deep threat basis. I think Fleming and Twilley are both better blockers than Smith and Jefferson. Warfield and Taylor, I think, is a standoff.
All right, now we're going to take a look at the defenses of both clubs and have Joe Namath pick them apart right after this message.
I'm Patrick Ross, president of the B.F. Goodrich Tire Company. Not Goodyear, Goodrich. As if our names weren't confusing enough, Goodyear advertises more than we do. So I'm not too surprised that a lot of people forget Goodrich and remember Goodyear. Maybe even go to Goodyear for Goodrich tires. But you can't get Goodrich steel radials at Goodyear. You see, we introduced the first American-made radial tire in 1965. The radial was and is the biggest tire innovation in nearly a quarter century. For 5 years nationally, we've advertised nothing else. Not because everybody wants radials, but because no conventional tire we've ever made, none, stops as fast, corners as well, and lasts as long as our Lifesaver steel radial. Now, without a doubt, you'll see Goodyear advertising a steel radial too, along with all their other tires. But don't get confused.
Lifesaver steel radials. If you want Goodrich, you'll just have to remember Goodrich.
All right, Joe, you played against both these clubs, Washington once, Miami twice. Let's take a look at the Washington defensive unit. This must be quite a defense. They didn't allow a touchdown in the 2 playoff games.
They've been playing great football, Kurt. I think the biggest asset they have is working with George Allen. He's a defensive strategist, and they learn the game, and they know exactly what their jobs are and what to do.
They call them a bunch of old men. Some are. Jack Pardee here, 36 years old, 15 years in the game. He was going to retire when he's 28 years old. He's still playing.
I think Jack might have a few more years left. Here he makes a tackle on the other side of the field, way out of his position. He knows where he's going. He's a great hustler. He's just a tremendous linebacker.
They mask a lot of it. They use mostly zone, don't they?
Yes, they do in their secondary. Here again, Pardee makes a heck of a play. I think he fought off a blocker and came hard. He read the play. He's good at reading plays, and he can upset a whole offensive.
Staubach hurts him here with his scramble. Greasy's a good scrambler. Of course, with his ankle, we don't know. But Rosie Taylor now coming up to make the hit.
Right, well, that was a blitz that time, and Roger just jumped right up inside of it. That was the best running play I think Dallas had all day.
And here's your old teammate, number 89. He'll be the defensive right end, Berlin Biggs.
Berlin's doing a good job at Washington, just as the rest of the fellas are. When you're winning and playing like this, you see the whole defensive unit in there making the tackle. Well, it's a great feeling. These guys, they play together and they win together.
They talk a lot on defense, don't they?
They do. When we played them this year, for instance, they had a couple of keys. The linebackers would yell out various things to their players and let them know what to do.
There's Hamburger, 55 all-pro wide linebacker.
Right, here he's trying to steal the ball. They're smart. They'll take a lot of chances, but only whenever they know they've got you stopped.
They got a smart little guy at left cornerback, only 170 pounds, Pat Fisher, an amazing player.
He sure is, for his size. He makes up with heart and know-how. Here he breaks up a pass to Allworth, but you see 3 Washington defenders right there on the play. These guys cover the ball. When that ball's in the air, they figure it's for them.
And Joe, studying the film, look at 89, the end go inside, the tackle 72 Talbot come outside. They stun a lot in that line, don't they?
They do, Kurt, especially in passing situations, almost exclusively in passing situations. They try to confuse the offensive line and try and break one man clean.
Well, that's quite a defensive club, the Washington Redskins, and is that the best unit you played this year, do you think?
Well, it's one of the top 2.
The other one we're going to talk about in a minute. We'll take a look at the Miami defensive unit right after this.
All the time people ask me, why don't you guys change your name? Goodrich, Goodyear, pretty confusing. And Goodyear's done more advertising. Look, I say, for 5 years nationally, we've advertised nothing but radial tires. We introduced the first one made in America. Now, you'll probably see Goodyear featuring a steel radial, too. You get confused? Look up in the sky. You see an enormous blimp up there with somebody's name on it? We're the other guys.
If you want Goodrich, you'll just have to remember Goodrich.
And now, over the stadium, the famous Goodrich blimp.
Goodrich doesn't have a blimp. Goodyear does. And since they've done more advertising, it's not too hard to confuse our names. But we believe the best way to keep our name from being forgotten is to keep making tires worth being remembered. And that's just what we're doing.
If you want Goodrich, you'll just have to remember Goodrich.
They call the Miami defense the no-name defense, or they used to, because they had obscure names of free agents, low draft picks, but by now they're all big names. They led the National Football League in the best defense this year. But yet, Joe, down in Miami, your Jet team, you put 24 points on the scoreboard against them, which was the most points scored against them this year. They have Vern Den Herder at left end and Fernandez at left tackle. What about those two?
Well, they're doing a heck of a job for them, just as Hines and their right end has been doing. But Miami's a well-coordinated defense. Just like Washington, they know their job. Schuler's done a tremendous job with them. I guess Fernandez has been the outstanding lineman in the bunch so far.
He'll be number 75. He's very quick.
Right. Miami's other end, Stanfield, does a good job. Here you can see him come in there. Their pass rush has improved over last year, which Miami was trying to do. But still, I think Washington's pass rush is better than Miami's.
Now, sometimes they'll bring in number 53, Bob Matheson. He can be either a left or right defensive end or a fourth linebacker, and they call that their 53 defense.
Right. It was designed to try and confuse the offensive blocking patterns, and sometimes it works. Sometimes He'll come on like a blitzing linebacker or a defensive end, and other times he'll drop back into pass coverage and only bring 3 members.
They're very alert. Here's Mumford recovering a fumble. This is what they do well. Intercept passes, recover fumbles.
Right, they make their breaks and take advantage of them. Here you see Bradshaw going back to pass. Now, he has time to find someone, but that Miami secondary plays great coverage. They played the best coverage that I've seen all year.
Nick Bonacani, too little to play pro football, they said.
That was a long time ago. Either Nick's growing a great deal or people have smartened up.
They have a good outside linebacking, too. They drop well. Here's Mike Colon on an interception.
I think Miami has the best coverage of anyone we've seen this year, or I've seen, that's for sure. The linebackers do get tremendous drop. They know their areas, and they know how to play the game.
Lloyd Mumford, Joe, is going to start at left cornerback. Tim Foley is injured. A lot of them say this might hurt Miami. What do you think?
No, I don't think it will. Now, I don't know exactly who's the better of the two, Foley or Mumford. They both have tremendous talent. But with the kind of coverages and combinations they play, they're not going to hang up Mumford one-on-one with Taylor or with Jefferson.
When you played against Washington and against Miami, which defense did you fear the most in throwing into?
Well, Kurt, it was 2 different situations. Against Washington, we had a few injuries. We didn't have our running backs in. And against Miami, we were on top of them most of the day. Up until the 4th quarter, we were winning the game. So Washington gave us more trouble throwing the football because we had to throw the ball more against them.
All right, what about, how do you rate the 2 defenses? Which is the best?
Well, Washington's the better of the 2 pass rushing teams. I think Miami has the best secondary. They play the best coverage. And the linebackers, well, you got Pardee and Hamburger, which are hard to beat, but you got Bunacani in the middle. So I'd have to give the outside linebackers a choice to Washington, but Bunacani in the middle.
Sounds like it's almost dead even on defense.
Sounds like it's dead even to me.
All right, we're going to take a look at the quarterbacks here with Joe Namath right after this.
Yesterday, one of my customers came in. Eddie, he said, I'm your friend, right? Change the name. Goodrich sounds like Goodyear, and they've done more advertising. They got a blimp, right? Out there in television land, Eddie, Goodyear is the name they remember. Maybe he's right. You see, Goodrich introduced the first American-made radial tire back in 1965. And for 5 years, nationally, it's the only tire we've advertised. Why? Because the radial is the biggest tire advance in nearly a quarter century. That's why. No conventional tire we've ever made, none, stops as fast, corners as well, and lasts as long as a Goodrich Lifesaver steel radial. Now watch, you'll probably see Goodyear featuring steel radials too, along with all our other tires. But this time, if you get confused, look up in the sky. You see an enormous blimp up there with somebody's name on it? We're the other guys.
Lifesaver steel radials. If you want Goodrich, you'll just have to remember Goodrich.
Let's talk about the 2 most important men in the game, the quarterbacks. I see where your old buddy George Blanda came out and said that Shula's wrong in starting Greasy instead of Morrow, that Greasy should be the spark plug coming in to lift the team if they need him if they're behind.
Well, I believe in that theory, Kurt, with one exception, and that's the Miami Dolphins. They feel that Bob is their quarterback, has been for 4 years, and he's their leader. I found this out in the last few days. Various people talking to the team.
They're positive about it, too.
They're positive Bob's their man.
Now, here's a man who's played 1 half in the last 3 months. He still has to be a little rusty. I think his ankle's all right. He moves around, but he's got to be a little rusty.
I would think so. I just don't know how he can be as sharp as he was before he got injured. Here you see Bob now. He's a smart quarterback. He reads the defenses. You can see him looking around in this film, reading the secondary. He can't find anyone, and if he does get in trouble, he still has the ability to scramble. He's a controlled scrambler. He knows where he's going. He looks for that receiver at all times, and he finds him a good percentage of the time.
How do you rate him among all the quarterbacks in football?
Well, you know, people have their choices. I got to put Bob in the top 4 or 5, that's for sure.
How about Billy Kilmer now? He's not supposed to throw long. He's in a terrible automobile accident a few years ago, and he can't run very well, but he's a winner, isn't he?
He is. He's got a lot of drive, a lot of desire. He's a great competitor. He'll never quit, and this is probably his most strongest asset. Billy knows what he can throw and what he can't throw, and he doesn't try to throw the things he can't throw best. He can throw the ball long by laying it up and over, and he can throw the slant patterns with super accuracy. But he doesn't drill the ball into deep outside patterns or the deep square ends. There's a perfect post pattern and a perfect pass. No one could have thrown that better.
How do you rate the quarterbacks?
Well, I would have to give Billy an edge at this stage because Billy's been playing all season long and Bob hasn't. So I would think Billy would be a bit sharper.
With Miami better depth with Morrow behind.
Yes, with Morrow, definitely, certainly.
Well, we've talked about everybody but the coaches, Joe, and Leroy Neiman's been waiting for us here, a famous sports artist, and he's been by. Leroy, how are you?
Joe?
We've all seen, in fact, he's done a lot of great paintings with Joe. And Leroy's been following these two clubs out here in California the past week at their hotels and around the press conferences and studying them and on the field. And what have you got for us with your brush?
My main observation about the coaches has been a kind of a hands-in-the-pocket tendency to think that our leaders, big decision makers, that seems to be kind of a form now.
Get your hand in your pocket.
Yeah, sure, all right. It used to be kind of frowned on, but now it seems to be kind of almost a style. Now there's Coach Allen with his hand in his side pocket. Coach Allen again with his hand in his back pocket. Don Shula at a chalk talk with his hand in his pocket. These are the big decision makers. I think that this whole thing, this trend, has been brought about by some of the world leaders, perhaps. Now, I got a drawing of #1 football fan, President Nixon, strolling with Henry Kissinger, and both of them have their left hands in their trousers.
Bet you there one, the big decision is what kind of a defense Washington should be using.
Another observation on our coaches. This is Coach Allen, kind of a Bill Holden type, rather handsome man. And then the rock-jawed Shula.
Both very intense, didn't you find that?
Both very intense and both always hollering and raving and shouting, which is kind of a stylish thing too. And the thing that I point out in the drawings is they're both completely different features. Feature for feature, they're totally different looking men, but when they holler, they both sort of look the same. They take on the same attitude. Larry Zonka, looking at a copy of a magazine, right? I did a painting of him in a magazine.
What did you think about it?
He said it helped his ego, and that he wanted to get back to his own painting. He'd like to improve his painting.
He paints himself.
Well, no, he said he'd like to get into painting, really, because he's a doer. He doesn't care to look at paintings.
He doesn't like the image of, the big football beast they let out of the cage and runs over everybody. He's really a kind man. You ever notice how many big men are sort of gentle in person?
During the game, Joe?
He's certainly gentle, but not during the game.
Not when he's got the ball in there. Thanks, Leroy, for an artist look at the Dolphins and the Redskins. Joe, we've talked about everything, phases of the game except the kicking game. I don't think there's much doubt that the Redskins and the Dolphins have the best specialty teams in the game. They wouldn't be in this game without them. Kicking the ball and covering the kicks, returning the kicks, and also the field goal kickers. How do you look at the kicking game?
Well, they're about equal, Kurt, with the exception of Upremian and Kurt Knight. I think Upremian is a better kicker than Knight. Knight is on a hot string. What's he have, 11 in a row now?
Right.
Well, he's on a hot string, but I think Upremian can hit longer and is more consistent.
All right, we've discussed every phase of it, and we're right down to the nub now. How do you predict Super Bowl VII? Who's going to win?
Well, Miami's impressed me all season long with their consistency, so I'm going to pick Miami by 5 points.
By 5 points.
I don't know how I picked those points, but by 5.
Well, you picked her by 3 last time, and we'll see if you can win it by 5 this time. Miami by 5. Any special reason?
Well, they're more consistent, I feel, and I think this is premium. Anytime you get around a 40-yard line, he's going to be kicking them at him.
All right, Joe Namath has called the Miami Dolphins the winner of Super Bowl VII by 5 points. Thanks, Joe. Leroy Neiman. And now we're going to be moving to the Los Angeles Coliseum so you can meet the starting players, the lineups, and also we'll have an update from the Coliseum right after this.
All the time people ask me, why don't you guys change your name? Goodrich, Goodyear, pretty confusing. And Goodyear's done more advertising. Look, I say, for 5 years nationally, we've advertised nothing but radial tires. We introduced the first one made in America. Now, you'll probably see Goodyear featuring a steel radial, too. You get confused? Look up in the sky. You see an enormous blimp up there with somebody's name on it? Where are the other guys?
If you want Goodrich, you'll just have to remember Goodrich.
And now, over the stadium, the famous Goodrich blimp.
Goodrich doesn't have a blimp. Goodyear does. And since they've done more advertising, it's not too hard to confuse our names. But we believe the best way to keep our name from being forgotten is to keep making tires worth being remembered. And that's just what we're doing.
If you want Goodrich, you'll just have to remember Goodrich.
And it's July and January here in Los Angeles. 84 degrees on the field. No wind, the turf in perfect lightning fast condition. Miami's won the toss. They're going to receive. Let's match up the two teams. Miami offense against Washington defense. Here, Manny Sistrunk also weighs 265. He'll go at defensive left tackle on running plays. Bob Kuchenberg of the Dolphins is one of the best blockers on sweeps in the NFL. He's rather an unsung performer. Washington's right linebacker, Chris Hamburger, weighs just 218, but he's been named All-Pro this year. Jim Langer is the Miami center. He's especially adept at picking up blitzing linebackers, and he'll be pitted against 33-year-old veteran middle linebacker Myron Padia, still strong against running plays, but is taken out on passing situations. Not many people argue when Miami right guard Larry Little is called the best pulling guard in pro football. And he may butt heads against Jack Pardee, 36 years old, a 15-year veteran at outside linebacker. Norm Evans is the last of the original Dolphins, a 250-pound right tackle. And also Bill Brundage, you'll see in there a tackle today, and they use him especially as their best pass rusher. Miami's number 42, Paul Warfield, may be the top wide receiver in the league. He can do it all. The right cornerback, Mike Bass of the Redskins, will have the pressure on him, but he's been a steady competitor this year. Howard Twilley is only 5'10", isn't very fast, but his hands more than make up for that, and he's a very smart player in finding openings in the zone defense. Another smart little tough man is Pat Fisher at 5'9", 170, the left cornerback of the Redskins. At 232 pounds, the Dolphin tight end Marv Fleming, an outstanding blocker. Not much of a pass receiver, although he did catch 5 against the Steelers. Brig Owens is the Washington strong safety man, and only 2 tight ends caught scoring passes against him this year after he replaced the injured Richie Pettibone. Mercury Morris, one of 3 1,000-yard rushers in today's Super Bowl, a tremendous threat outside. He'll be trying to get around Ron McDowell, the 265-pound defensive left end of the Redskins, who at the age of 32 is having perhaps his best season. Larry Sonka, the big bull, power man, short yardage, gained 1,117 yards this year for the Dolphins. He may be running right at defensive right end Verlin Biggs at 275, one of the few skins who played before in a Super Bowl game. Bob Greasy will open at quarterback. They say he is another coach on the field. And a smart defensive coach can be 34-year-old Rosie Taylor, the Redskins' free safety man. Well, there they are. Those will be the starting lineups. Miami's going to be receiving. Washington will be on the defense. 2 weeks in preparing, a week here in California, night and day. All these players, their coaching staffs, all they have thought about is the Super Bowl. And they'll be coming out on the field here very shortly. And so, stay tuned. Following station identification for Super Bowl VII. Super Bowl VII preview has been brought to you by the B.F. Goodrich Tire Company, makers of the Lifesaver Steel Radial Tire. If you want Goodrich, you'll just have to remember Goodrich.
California, here I come.
Perry Como recreates the sounds of Cole Porter in Paris, Wednesday at 10, 9 Central Time.
Welcome to the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum and Super Bowl VII. December 19th, one of the most glorious eras in United States history came to a close as our representatives for all mankind completed the first step upward toward the stars. With us today, making their first public appearance since returning from the moon, in front of an Apollo command module, and on behalf of the thousands of Americans who made our space program such a success, is the crew of Apollo 17. Navy Captain Eugene A. Cernan, Navy Captain Ronald E. Evans, and geologist Dr. Harrison H. Smith. Gentlemen, we salute you. Welcome home.
7, the Miami Dolphins versus the Washington Redskins from the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. Brought to you by Chrysler Plymouth, now featuring Plymouth Gold Duster. It's a gold sticker value. And by Goodyear, makers of the new custom steel guard radial tire. And by Xerox Corporation, who make information their business worldwide. Pageantry and color at the Super Bowl. Let's go down on the field.
Yes, California, here we are. Because since September, the Michigan Band has been California dreaming. From the Holy Angel School in Chicago, under the direction of Sister Lorraine. From their spaceship America back to Earth, our astronauts bid farewell to the moon. Not the us today, the little angels from the Holy Angel School in Chicago, under the direction of Sister Lorraine. From their spaceship America back to Earth, our astronauts bid farewell to the moon. Not the end of space exploration, but the beginning of man's coming together. We invite you to join the Apollo 17 crew in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now, to honor America, let's join the little angels in the singing of our national anthem.
Again.
right to clear the field, and we're going to get it underway.